ZohoDay24 in McAllen, Texas.
McAllen, Texas. Yeah, well, it really is Zoho Days because it was a couple of days, but
Don't you want to
yeah.
go in and change that? Like change that hashtag?
Yeah,
Days,
Zoho Days.
right?
Yeah, well, so Zoho Day. I mean, let's focus on the first day, which is you saw the CEO had the keynote about their what I can't like it's such a
Transnational localism.
transnational
It
localism.
comes right off the tip of my
Yeah,
tongue. Maybe
I know.
because I did a podcast and I talked about it at 9 a.m. this morning.
Yeah, and
Maybe.
I've said it and heard it so many times, and it still doesn't come off my tongue really that easily. But it's really all kind of about bringing this economic value to economies and supporting lower wage earners and lower cost of living. And they really talked a lot about their investment in McAllen, Texas, as one of the locations. But there's a bunch all across the world, and they're not all, these really rural areas. Some of them are small cities, but where they really go in and kind of they talk about the cost of living and the potential for greater affordability in these economies. It sounds very altruistic, and it is, and there's definitely a focus on that with this company of how they approach their sort of their ethos, and you can tell that it's really coming from a place of wanting to do good in the world. But where I really thought there was a lot of value was in the one-on-ones and the breakouts, where it was kind of focused on how this approach translates into business value, where being local, setting up shop with locals, hiring locals, understanding the needs of these local economies, local businesses, they're really getting to understand, like, speaking the language, understanding the cultural needs. It's not having, a sales team from India calling on somebody in Canada and not understanding the cultural differences there. And so it's not just learning the cultural differences, it's actually placing people in those regions and really getting to know, immersed in that culture. Like, I spoke with one of their regional leads in Canada, and they have two different language teams. So obviously, in Canada, there's a large French speaking population and then English speaking population. And culturally, that can be very different in terms of how they do business, in terms of, their needs, their all the things. So if you really look at it from a business strategy standpoint, I actually think that Zoho is not necessarily doing this for the reason of, like the greenwashing thing. They're not saying like, oh, we're going to do this because it looks good and all that. It is very strategic. But I actually think that they could get more out of it. The company could get more out of it by quantifying it and showing the value to companies, because increasingly,
They have to make, it's either lower costs or better product fit and benefit to their business,
right.
right? That I think that's what you're talking about. So it's almost like an economic value study that shows this.
Yes. And I think that, if this was a public company, they would have to quantify these things and they would have to really explain a lot of this to shareholders. And I think there's an opportunity to do that just for a business, from a business standpoint, to show to not just their customers, but to potential customers, the good that does, what that translates into business value when they know their customers that well and they know the business and the opportunities that well. So I think, there's an opportunity there, but I also think there was I learned a lot in the one-on-ones and in the breakout sessions of what the company is doing, in CRM, in ERP, in HCM, where they really do pay attention to their customers' needs and they have a very specific fit. Are they going to compete with Microsoft or Google? Probably not, but they play really well with those big players. I spoke to a couple of their customers where they use, maybe Zoho Desk for one thing, but they're not switching off of Google Workspace. So but that doesn't create a problem for them. Even if they're using Zoho for CRM, all of the documents can be really easily integrated. And so I think I see definitely some opportunities there, and also some places where they can connect the dots better. But I think we'll see more at Zoholics, where they'll talk about more products. I did get a couple of teasers on some products that I can't talk about, but I think at Zoholics we'll see more about products and see how they're connecting those dots.
Yeah, this is an analyst event, and while it makes it, I think, more exciting when there are products being announced, I think that we're going to see a ton of it at Zoholics. Are you attending?
Yes.
That's great, and we're also going to have the 6.5 on site as well. So
Yeah.
looking forward to that.